Right, and after that, welcome to Ron and Catherine. It's really good to have you both here. Ron and Catherine have been through a really difficult, stressful time over, well, a period of the last probably 10 years, I'm going to guess. Yeah, 10 years or so, maybe more, where they had a business collapse. But through that, they've experienced God really working in their lives through it. So tonight we're going to be talking to Ron and Catherine about keeping your faith when everything seems to go wrong. And sometimes we need a change of perspective, a new paradigm in life. And God's using all sorts of circumstances to achieve that. And so Ron and Catherine are going to share with us tonight some of the trials and triumphs of God shifting the paradigm for them. So we're looking forward to that. So what we'll do is we'll just start with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for Ron and Catherine, and we thank you for the trials that you put on them. And we thank you now that they can be able to share those with us, and that for those of us who are going through similar things, that we will be able to take comfort in that and get advice from them, and to be able to live our lives in a way that stays devoted to you, that keeps our families and our marriages strong, and that honors you above all else. Please bless them as they discuss their experiences tonight, and help us all to keep our minds and hearts centered on you. We thank you through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thought as a reading tonight, we'd take 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 3 to 7. And this is a really neat one, and it really sort of sums up what Ron and Catherine are going to be sharing with us, doing with us tonight. It says this, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. Praise be to the God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings which we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you share in our comfort. So I hope that was an appropriate sort of reading for tonight. So
very well.
You've chosen the topic, twisting the cube. That's why you chose to name it. Now, what does twisting the cube mean? What's it all about? You better explain that, because like 38 people here have tuned in to find out what is twisting the cube all about.
So I guess I'd say it comes from one of Catherine's favourite sayings, and she uses this saying a lot, and the idea behind it is that, and perhaps we can use a prop here. So I have a cube here, obviously, and you can kind of twist the cube and get a different perspective on what's happening, just slightly different perspective on any face of the cube. But then you can actually twist the cube and you might get a whole different paradigm, and things can look completely different. And I think the analogy that I think is really good about this is when I think and look at the sufferings of Job, for instance, there were 6 different viewpoints. You know, Job had his viewpoint as to why these things happened, and then he had 3 friends who also wanted to weigh in on what was taking place in Job's life, and they become, you know, significantly critical on Job's life. And then came Elihu as the 5th person who also had his opinion on these things. And then finally, God spoke. And they had to kind of wait right till the end till they got, or Job got, a total paradigm shift in perspective of when God suddenly twisted the cube, and Job saw it differently. So I like that idea that sometimes there's not 2 sides to every story. Sometimes there's 6 sides to any one story, and everyone's story is changing, but sometimes you have to wait for time to actually see what God's side of the story is. So I think it's kind of a good thing to think about in life.
And also the fact that if you were to hold a cube, at one point, you can only see 3 faces, yet a cube has 6. So there's 3 other faces that are totally irrelevant to the situation that you may never have considered. So it's just a little reminder to go, hang on a sec, there might be another way of looking at this. So it's sort of
really fantastic. Yeah. So with that introduction, can you share with us your story, your background, and what was going on that helped bring you to see these different sides of a cube?
So I guess from the business perspective, we moved to Whangarei from Palmerston North for the purpose of owning a business, and it had always been my passion to want to own my own business. And I had fairly grandiose ideas of how that might happen, and that I wanted to be a successful businessman. And so we were in business, and it was kind of a family business for a number of years, and then things changed and we got quite big, and we amalgamated our business, and we grew very fast, very quickly. And then through events, through the GFC, things came crashing down incredibly fast. So
that's the global financial crisis.
Yeah, yes, I think everybody kind of has a GFC story if they were in business at the time. And for us, the biggest problem we had was we had moved into exporting, and we had found a market, particularly into Hawaii, and it was a huge part of our business. It was massively significant. And when the global financial crisis came about, that market just dried up overnight. It didn't slow, it just completely stopped, because we were dealing in, we were selling into people's investment properties, into condominiums and things like that, and that market just died. And we couldn't restructure quick enough. And the problem was we had invested so much in a building and stock and plant, and so we found ourselves drowning very quickly. And we tried to sort of limp on through that process. And for 4 years, we were kind of treading water. Probably for 2 years, we were still sinking. And then for 2 years, we were treading water. And then in 2012, our major creditor, who was also a supporter of ours, which was Fletcher Aluminium, called in the receivers. And basically the business was shut up overnight, and we were pretty much essentially bankrupt, I suppose.
But prior to that, was Fletcher's had agreed that they had found a buyer for the business.
Yeah.
So in about September 2012, we were all gearing up to sign papers for someone to buy it. We weren't going to get much out of it, but it was going to be transfer of assets, some debts, and the guy was going to take over all the contracts that we had. So that was ready to sign, and he needed to move to Whangarei, and he told his wife he would like to buy this business, and she said, sorry, but I'm going to divorce you. So totally fell over. So we were in limbo for about a week thinking, wow, what's going to happen now? And then we got a demand letter for a lot of money, and I suppose it was very stressful. Well, it was stressful the whole time, but this came to a point. And I suppose that was the funny side of it. We sat down, perhaps like on a couch like here, and we read the letter and it said, if you do not pay XYZ by 5 p.m., this will happen. And we're like, we watched the clock go to 5 and like, we didn't know what to do. There
The
was
money
no-
didn't fall from the ceiling, unfortunately.
There's no money.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of just, I suppose, letting go and just thinking, almost like Peter in the boat, just jumping out. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen now. So yeah, that's what started it. That's what started that finishing of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Started
That
it
must
then.
have been a very stressful time for you.
Hmm.
I think the stress too was coming up to it and what people think, what people say. You trying every way to fix it up. Like we managed to rent out a corner of the building. We had some very lovely brethren and sisters that were able to just help us along the way, family. Yet the debt was so big and we got to the point where it was so out of control that we actually didn't know what to do. In hindsight.
We didn't know how to close a business. We didn't know how to walk away. It was, you were just completely trapped.
And then I suppose Fletcher's chose to, instead of selling the business to someone, they called in the receivers. And the good part about that was they then analysed stuff and then they resold it on. So all our staff got taken over and have jobs. And to this day, still work in the man that bought the business up in Whangarei making windows and doors. So yeah, not us. And I suppose from my point of view, I loved working. I was full on worrying about staff. And you soon learn when things go bad that loyalties go out the window. People have an opinion. They think this, they think worse things. But you've got to look and think God provides. And going from one very stressful situation, the same day, Ron went to open and help out at the Bible Education Centre that we set up in Whangarei. So as one door sort of jammed shut, but there was still noise going on, Ron can tell the story from his point of view.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what happened there, Ron?
So, you know, when you ask about, you know, being stressful and looking at the cube again, it's kind of amazing how you can present yourself like this to everyone around you when in fact you're actually like this,
Stuff.
you know, and people could look and say, well, you know, he seems to have it together or they've got it together and they don't know really what's actually going on, you know, behind the scenes. And yeah, so I think when the receivers did come in, it was a incredibly humbling experience. But what led to it, and I think this is kind of I share a little bit of a funny story leading up to the receivers coming in. We didn't actually know the receivers were going to kind of come in. We didn't know Fletchers were going to do this because, as we said, they had a sale and they had been kind of backing us and supporting us. And when the sale fell through, the receivership just happened out of the blue. So we didn't know that, and like we were desperately trying to find a way, trying to find any funding or anybody that might back us and help us through this. And like the day before, I was so stressed out about it. My dad rang me. I think he's on tonight, and he rang me and he said, "Oh, by the way, I've been to the bank, and you may remember that your granddad gave you some bonus bonds when you were kids. I checked up on them, and apparently Philip and Irene don't have any bonus bonds, but you have, but they wouldn't tell me how much they are and how much they're worth because you have to go in and do that." And I was thinking, oh, wow, this, I didn't tell Catherine. I was like, silently in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, you know, I've been praying about this could be it, because, you know, bonus bonds are a little bit, you know, they can accumulate, they can be like lotto. So I'm thinking, oh, this could be the answer. So I went into the bank and took all my ID and everything and went up there and said, you know, apparently there's, you know, I have some bonus funds. And she said, yes, you do. Let me just check. Da, 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 da. She came back and she said, yes, you have $10. I said, would you like to cash that or keep that? So anyway, that was kind of that moment where it was like, oh. And so that was actually, and this was the amazing thing. So I went back home, and whilst I chuckled about it at the bank, it was just like unbelievable. And I broke down. I remember being in the kitchen, and I just burst out crying, and I just fell on the floor and just prayed, and I just said, Lord, take it away. Just take it away, whatever it takes. I can't deal with this anymore. And so the next day the receivers came in, and I was like, oh, I didn't mean it like that.
Always be careful what you ask.
Yeah. But that's what happened. And like, as I say, we didn't know how that process was going to take place, but the receivers walked in, coming with their, you know, flash black Audi SUVs, parked in the door, walked in, you know, basically introduced themselves, told us what they were about, spent an hour going over things, and then said, you're out of here, goodbye. You're, you know, we don't need you at all now. And that was it. I just walked out of, well, yeah, I mean, like I felt sort of pretty brokenhearted, but at the same time, it was an incredible amount of weight off my shoulders, because it was like, I'm not in control anymore. So once it's taken off, it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but now it's not my responsibility anymore. And up until that time, I was bearing this burden of, what am I going to do? How am I going to fix this? So when the receivers walked in, it was like, well, I can't do anything. And I walked out, and, you know, this was again the incredible providential part, is we had no idea the receivers were coming on that Friday, and our Bible Education Centre was opening on the Monday. And I had committed to our meeting that I was going to work at the Bible Education Centre, make copies for 2 days a week. And leading up to it, I thought, there's no way I can do this. I just cannot, give this sort of time, because I'm under so much pressure at work. But after that, it was like 2 days a week. I could do this 5 days a week.
So by this stage, you had no job. But you did have the work, Catherine? You were still employed by the company?
What happens is, when a receiver takes over, it's called voluntary, well, not voluntary, they administer the company. So the company still trades, but it trades under the receiver's name. So they become the workers technically. So they asked me if I'd like to stay on and help out. They didn't. Ron was technically surplus to requirements, and because our cars were company cars, they all had to be surrendered back to the business. I had just bought a little red car, I think, and that got complicated, but we got it out of the business. But I did go and work with the receivers, and then when the new guy bought it, he asked if I would work. Now, that all sounds nice, and it was very nice, but it was really, for me, a paradigm shift where I was the boss, for want of a better word. I was in charge, and I then had to go and do the same job, but my opinion didn't matter anymore. I just had to go and just do accounts or data entry. Plus, I also had to save face with the other workers that had all come across who knew and had been hurt because they had lost money as well. So there was a lot of sadness and saving face, I suppose, that at some point I just wanted to run away.
Yeah.
Jimmy and Abby were here to run to them. But you have to I had to face up to it. So yeah, look, and it happened, what, 8 years ago, and it can still catch you. But a happy thing, we're friends with our people that we know up there. I can still email and text the people we used to work with. We don't have as much to do with them as we ever used to, but I could meet them in the street, and I wanted to be able to walk down Whangarei because it's a tiny place and still wave to the people who used to work for me. So yeah, it's a paradigm shift in the fact that you just have to realize that, take a big deep breath, the sun will come up tomorrow and something will happen. So
Yeah. Wow. Yes,
Yeah.
it must have been incredibly difficult. And Ron, you spoke about the fact that, obviously you were unemployed and now you were volunteering at the Bible Education Centre, and you were, the question was, how are we, where's our income coming from? Can you share us the miracle that kind of came about from this point on?
Yeah. I think the crazy part about it, and I think I'm going to talk a little bit about in the middle of the crisis, I went to Pakistan, and maybe I can just pick up on that for this reason, is that after the receivers walked in, and as I said, this load was taken off my shoulders, and I felt that I was not in control. It was actually so liberating, and to the point where I was absolutely confident that God was going to look after us. And yet before it, when I was in control, when I was trying to solve it, I had no idea of how we were going to survive or what we were going to do. And I can't really explain that, but it was just, I think the Pakistan story probably
2 years earlier.
2 years earlier. So in the middle of, like, when it was at its absolute worst, when we were totally drowning, I was asked by Tim Galbraith if I would go to Pakistan and lead a Bible school over there. And so I committed to doing it. And I remember treating it like a Nazarite vow. I remember I'm just going to try to put everything behind me from the time I hop on the plane and just give whatever I can give to this work that needs to be done. And it was an incredible experience, like a life-changing experience, going to Pakistan and sharing with them, and just, put life in perspective. All my worries about finances and business, and then you go and see these people which,
houses.
they have nothing, and they're just so happy. They're just so content. And then I'm thinking, wow, I'm just so pathetic with the things I worry about. So here I am going over to try to spiritually encourage other people, and suddenly felt that it was the other way around. I was the one that was in desperate spiritual need of help. And so at the end of the 3 weeks, I was just buzzing. I was kind of ready to come back and face it. And it was, like, when you talk about a Nazarite vow, the climax always happens with the drama at the end of a Nazarite vow, where the Nazarite shaves his head and offers it, and it's like the consummation of everything he committed to. So on the way back from Islamabad down into Karachi, here I am on the plane, and I'm reading this fascinating article about this German tourist who had escaped 10 years being captive by the Taliban, because when she hopped off a plane in Islamabad airport, she was arrested by the military at the airport, and then she was sold by the military to the Taliban, because there's so much corruption that goes on between, Pakistan authorities and the Taliban. Anyway, I thought this was an incredible story, and it was pretty powerful. And then next thing you know, we all got arrested by the military and got the full treatment of having, blindfolded, sack over the head, handcuffed, and taken away to some location and interrogated for 6 hours. So you can imagine what's going through my mind at this stage. and the fears and anxiety that goes on. Well, you know, are we going to be, you know, we're going to get out of here? No one's ever going to know in New Zealand. How is anyone going to reach in to, you know, to help us? We could just disappear off the face of the planet. And like once they had taken your passports, you suddenly felt, actually, I'm nobody. I'm just nothing. And after 6 hours of being in this situation and praying and praying and praying, I came to a complete peace with my situation. I was ready to accept what was going to happen, and my fears, which was always what would happen to my family, what would happen to Catherine, what would happen to the kids if I got killed. I came to this conclusion, well, God will look after that, and I was at peace, and I think that was a life-changing moment for me. That helped me when I came to the business. That after that event, I just knew that God was going to, it was okay, it was all going to be okay.
Got it.
And so what happened after that was I went to the Bible Education Centre with no job, no prospects of job, but no money, nothing, no vehicle. And I got a ring from the principal of Exceed, who I knew, and he said, oh, Ron, I've heard what's happened. He said, I want to help set you up in business in Whangarei. And I said, oh, that sounds great. But I said, I haven't got any money to actually buy a business. And he says, no, I'm aware of that. He said, you know, I know I've heard the situation. He says, but I'm quite happy to set you up because I know your background in the window industry. I know you're capable of it, so I can give you a van, I can set it up with stock, I'll give you a territory, and you can just pay that back over a year. And so I said to him, well, that's fantastic. I said, but you know, I'm actually committed also to this Bible Education Centre for my church. And I've committed to, you know, being down here a few days a week. And he says, well, I don't care how you run your business, Ron. He says, well, why don't you put somebody else in the van so you can still help your church out? So that's what happened. Now, I'm not sure if Chris and Maria are online, but what transpired was Chris Wright came back from India, and he was a builder, contractor, and his job was no longer really available when he came back. And Chris also wanted to help out at the BEC. And so we just said, well, why don't you, Chris, work at the BEC while I go out in the van and fix windows and doors, and then I'll work at the BEC and you go out in the van. And we did that, and it was just fantastic. It was a great source of income that just happened instantly, and we both managed to be working. In fact, during the whole 9 months we worked at the BEC, we had no financial issues. No.
Wow.
That is just so amazing. So amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, forward.
But also there are people that I noticed that are on that were incredibly generous. And when I say we had no financial issues, they were both a support to us financially, but more importantly, a tremendous moral support and encouragement to us. And I just think, you know, the love from brothers and sisters and helping out was just phenomenal, just incredible.
Mm.
And I suppose we're offering to share our story because ours is a financial sadness, you know, but it can happen for other things as well. And it's just how you try and deal with it, how you learn about yourselves in your marriage and stuff like that. So yes, we had arguments, and it was often about money, and just appreciating where each was on that journey. And like I explained before with the Rubik's Cube having 6 sides, I could see it from my point of view. There was the boys as well. They were teenagers at the time. And then Ron obviously was hurt because he wasn't in the business. So I look back and I think, yes, we have to be very be aware. And I suppose, yeah, being aware of others around is so important, and how you are and how you're feeling in a particular moment.
So how did this affect your whole family and your boys in particular? The whole, business breakdown and all that sort of thing. You lost your house as well during that time as well, didn't you?
The house was already our decision to have sold it long before that. And we moved to work, and we lived in an apartment at work, and the boys are teenagers, and they really quite liked it because we lived near a rock climbing place, and they learnt to rock climb. But based on last week where Doug and Cindy talked about the 5 love languages, this would be my plug for tonight. I was offered that book by a friend, and I read the 5 love languages for teenagers. Go and have a look online, buy it if you've got teenagers. It was so helpful, because if you're stressed out and your brain's worrying about a business, you do have to work with your children. And I found that very helpful to this day. And I loved the book, and that helped that. I suppose as far as the boys go with the business, they'll never want to buy it.
No, they definitely saw the stresses of the appearance, and I would say it put them off the concept of ever owning their own business. Although
not owning our business.
Well, yeah, they definitely wouldn't want to own our business. Yeah. So, and I think looking back, I thought that I had things under control spiritually. I thought I was still okay spiritually, but the truth was, I was far too caught up in the business anyway. When it was at the height and it was at the peak of really pushing ahead, that was probably where I was at my worst spiritually. I was so focused on the business, I was so focused on growth, and I was away a lot. I was back and forth to the UK, to Hawaii, and it all sounds glamorous, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. But it's like, I really robbed Catherine and the boys of precious time, and so I do regret that. I mean, I've still got a fantastic relationship with my kids, and Catherine and I have this wonderful ability.
And we're in-laws now, so we have to behave ourselves.
Yeah. So, and then Catherine helped me once, which I once just like.
That's what being married's all about, right?
She was right once when I let her. And it was in this thing that she read about this guy with a worry tree. And I must admit, I did this a lot, is that when I had a huge amount of stress from work, and I think this is a great little story, and it comes from a story about a guy that had lots and lots of stresses at work, and he took his boss to his house for dinner one day, and he stopped at the door, and he had a plant outside, and he was just grabbing the leaves on the plant before they went inside, and the boss noticed that when he got inside, he was just a totally different person. He was just interactive with his kids and da-da-da-da. And he asked him the next day, what was this thing, why he was touching the tree? And he says, work has so many stresses and so many problems. And he says, this is my worry tree. He says, I hang my worries on this tree before I walk in the door, because my family, my kids don't need to have my worries. And then he says, when I go out in the next morning, I pick them up again. And he said, you know what? He says, the most amazing thing is that after a night at home with your family, there aren't near as many worries hanging on that tree as what he put on before he went in. So that's so true. You have so many things, and if you can just kind of compartmentalize things away from your family. So I tried to do that, but I can't say I did that all the time. But I did, I don't.
Keep reinventing yourself. You do stuff, it may work, it may not. Try something else. maybe you could put that in the chat, Robert. It's called The Trouble Tree, and I actually found it on the internet, and it's a lovely little story about dealing with work stresses. It could
Put it up there afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
The trouble tree.
So I would say, you know, the kids actually were pretty resilient over what happened, and they done very well, considering what we were going through, that's for sure. And we had a really supportive ecclesia, you know, like, and like, I think one of the amazing things with our boys is, you know, there was no one really their age, but they interacted so well with the older members of our ecclesia, which was fantastic. They had uncles and aunts and grandmas and granddads within our ecclesial environment that were always supporting them. So.
Yeah.
So if you got any, like, that was really good. I was going to ask the question just before you started on that. What advice would you give to someone running a small business or thinking about getting into business to keep that home work ecclesial life balance? Which you've answered some of that. Any other ideas? Any other tips for someone who's getting into that sort of situation that you were in?
Yeah, I guess, you know, counting that cost or weighing or making the plan of what potentially, you know, are the risks of you on your own spirituality and on your family's spirituality, needs to be considered very carefully. So there's a lot of things that can come at you from different angles, and it's almost like when you're planning, saying, okay, what's going to happen if we end up under huge financial stress? How am I going to deal with this for my family? And on the converse, which is actually almost, is what happens if I'm immensely successful? Because I think God saved us from that. And as I say, if I look back to what happened and where I was going, I can now look back and say, I'm so thankful that, you know, we weren't successful, that the business collapsed. So, yeah, I think.
But thankful the cube looked a mess from your perspective.
Yeah. And obviously we, you know, like when we're home, we're always trying to, you know, do things with the kids, in terms of, you know, doing, or at least reading to make it interactive and fun. So we were always trying to, you know, like with the boys, we always did charades all the time, and we had some funny nights with the kids doing charades on the readings, and yeah, so those family times were really cool.
And then they grow up. Yeah. But one aspect I'd like to share as well is, because of that, another paradigm shift is the fact that we will always rent a house. So up comes the big discussion: do you buy a house? Do you have a mortgage? And it's just a really interesting thing that, you know, I probably always dreamed about owning a house, because I worked in an industry where we made windows and doors. So I always had thought of what builder I'd use, what window joinery I'd have. And you always had this like bit of a, hey, I wonder what nice house we'll have, you know, because you always want a nice one. And the one nice thing about the receivership when it happened was we'd already sold our house, so we were already in rented accommodation. So one blessing was when the business fell over, we didn't get kicked out of our house because we were only renting, and you know, that was no concern to them. There was obviously no asset in that. So I suppose now I can share with young marrieds and young couples that are coming up about home ownership that it's a changing paradigm. It's not, for some, it's not going to happen. So how do you survive in this new era sort of thing, like sharing houses, being flatmates? It's all part of the changing process of life, reinventing yourself and seeing God in little miraculous things. So,
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how do you feel your faith was impacted through all this experience?
I definitely, you know, for a positive sense, And I think from being humbled, it does make you far less judgmental or critical of other people and more accepting of other people.
That things happen.
And I suppose accepting of everybody else's journey. And I think if I look back to what I was before these things to where I am now, I do really try to stay out of judgment and to stay out of criticism of anybody's journey.
Yeah.
Sound like it's the bird, was it?
Gareth's walked out of the room.
I just
Yeah.
agreeing, see? Yeah. So yeah, so that's one thing. One thing in terms of spirituality. The other thing I think that is probably, you know, a big thing is like now I meditate far more than I ever did. You know, like I suppose in terms of, you know, mental health and mental well-being, just thinking about God and being conscious of God in my life all the time. And then the other thing is you know, we're in a immensely blessed situation at the moment. We're being blessed with, you know, a good job. We both enjoy what we're doing, which is really great. I've been incredibly blessed with a very, very loyal and tremendous staff member who's incredibly supportive, and I'm just so thankful for that. But I'm also conscious of the fact that it could change in a moment.
And lockdown proved that.
And like when lockdown happened, like there's fears of the coronavirus and different things like that. I think because of what happened in Pakistan and what happened in our business, it's like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Just, you know, almost like with Christ in the vessel, we smile at the storm. It's like, you know, I'm in good space now, but if it changes, I'm still okay with that, and we're okay with that, you know.
Yeah.
I believe that the sun comes up tomorrow, and that another one of the little things I used to look out for was when things were really hard at work, I'd go out and there was always a rainbow. It must have been the time of year, a bit like now. And even if, you know, you didn't want to read the Bible, you didn't feel like praying, you just trying to lift your eyes up to see something, and only rainbows come. We can't make rainbows, well, one's in the sky anyway. So yeah, look for rainbows even when you're sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so fantastic.
So if we get back to the cube.
Yes.
So you've had
Yes.
a full paradigm shift there. You've started out. You've been the sort of you've been on the messed up side, and you've seen what God can do when He twists the cube in ways you don't expect, in ways that are really uncomfortable, and changes it to become pretty much clear and one color, right?
Yeah.
In a way, as
You
good
know,
as we get out of the kingdom.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. You know, like that's one of the other things about the cube is my kids both love doing the Rubik's Cube. I mean, I can get to getting down a couple of levels, you know, one color and down 2 layers, and that's about as far as I get. But if you've ever watched, you know, these experts do the cube, the amazing part is they never do the cube like I do, where I do one color at the top and then I try to get down the 2 layers and slowly try to do it. They work on algorithms where, you know, you could be looking at the cube where it's like this and it's only 2 or 3 moves away from completion. And I think that's the kind of like the amazing thing, the way God can work in our lives. We can look at each other and we could just or ourselves and think we're in a complete shambles. But from God's perspective, he knows that algorithm, and he's going to perfect a masterpiece in us, and it may only be a couple of moves away from completion, even if we don't see it, and especially if others don't see it. So I like the analogy when looking at others, and you might say, well, man, their life's messed up. It's like, maybe you just need to spin the cube a bit, because it might be, you know, from God's perspective, they might be a whole lot closer to having it all together. So trusting that God is, I suppose, you know, completing a good work in us, and that he knows the algorithm, even if we can't see it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really fantastic. And we really, really appreciate you sharing all this with us tonight. I mean, it must have been incredibly hard, all that you went through, and even the sense of failure, I suppose. I mean, is that something that was a problem that came through with it, or you struggle in that particular way?
yeah, that was huge. That was like, you know, for me, you might be surprised to know I'm quite competitive.
Maybe.
No.
Really?
So I tend to be, you know, a little bit competitive, and so, you know, success, I was quite sort of driven to be a successful business person. And so, you know, Whangarei is a small town. It wasn't just failure, feeling like a failure in terms of a father, a provider, a husband, but it was a sense of failure. I felt like I'd let everybody down at our work, and like, you know, they were like family, and then suppliers and any the creditors, and you know, we were desperate to try to keep all the creditors good, especially the little guys, you know, like the ones that desperately needed the money to, you know, to survive and pay their mortgages. And then you walk down the street in a small town, it's like, well, you know, lots of people knew you, you know, like we interacted in business with a lot of people. So that sense of failure was incredibly humbling. Yeah.
And then Ron, you have to find an outlet. So when you're really stressed, you do have to find an outlet. Ron liked playing squash, so he often played squash, and that was his way. What did you say?
Of smashing the ball as hard as I could against the wall and just, you know, burning out some energy. And that helped when I came home to be able to put a few things on that trouble tree. And so often I would, you know, finish work and try to have a game of squash before I went home, and it really did help. So another good little tip for somebody. Maybe not take up squash, but boxing or something.
Yeah. Well, we really, really do appreciate you sharing this with us tonight, and just to see the way your faith has remained strong and how you've been able to see God in the whole circumstances of your lives, and those little gems along the way, those little nuggets like you described when we were chatting yesterday, where you can just dig down and you can find those little nuggets of gold that are there, and the way God is just in charge. And yeah, really fantastic. Thank you so much.
And the way when one door is closed, another one's opened, just like that. It's like, wow, and you don't see it beforehand either. It's amazing. Yeah.
And another thing that helped me was putting a picture in my mind of different little things. So when I worked when I was taken by the receivers and employed by the new person, I felt like my wings were broken. And there was a song, wasn't there, on the radio? So we often used to find a song or something that would stick in our mind. Anyway, Ron was at the BEC, and I suppose I felt a bit sad that I was earning some money to pay the rent as I felt, but I wasn't helping out at the BEC. And I remember Jimmy and Abby came over to help out at the BEC, and I got stuck at work and couldn't come and help them, and I felt bad about that. And then for me, that was a reminder that work isn't everything. You know, family has to come first. So I got the courage and I went to work. I never told Ron, and I resigned. I said, okay, it's like my wings are fixed now. And that's what I wrote in my resignation letter. I wrote, I've grown my wings back and I'm going. And I came to the VEC and I sat down and I said, hi, Ron, yeah, I have a coffee. And then I said, I quit. What did you quit for? So yeah, it's,
And change the new paradigm.
and then he's like, oh, we'll have to survive. So I put on an Exceed shirt and I was an Exceed worker for a while. But anyway, it just shows you whatever situation you're in, sad, happy, you've got to keep reinventing yourself and taking a big deep breath. And Jesus has given us hope that he's always there and you've got to try and find him. And just another little analogy, Ron, of getting out of the boat. And if you're in the waves, you know, one minute you see Jesus and then the waves take over and you can't see him. And, you know, just little illusions like that. I used to think I was in surfing. I liked surfing, not on a surfboard, but we grew up surfing on a boogie board. And it'd be like getting tossed off and just rolling around in the waves and not actually knowing what way was up. And then other times, say like right now, we feel we're happy here. We've got a lovely rental house. We share it with some awesome flatmates. And we just want to share and pay it forward. And that verse that you read, Robert, it said that we can be comforted to comfort others. So I'm opening up to say, anyone can ring me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, it's just fantastic.
Thank you. You two are beautiful.
Yeah, really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, we will wrap up now because we've gone on probably a little longer than we usually have. What's coming up on Family Matters in the next few weeks? We've had a few weeks where we've had the questionnaire up and we've taken some notes from that, and we are going down to around about 2 weeks, 2 weekly from now on. So that means that next week we're going to take a break for the 6th of July, and we're going to move to roughly every second week. But the 2 weeks after that will be going consecutively because, and this will happen once in a while, because what we're going to be looking at, we're going to be talking to Grant, Glenn, and Julie Anderson, and they're from Detroit. And Grant had a major car accident on his way home from a Bible school when he was quite young, in his teens. The car went pretty much straight under a semi truck, crushed the whole thing, and he was cut out of the car and suffered some severe brain injuries and multiple injuries all over his body. And so we're going to talk to them about his recovery and the way that they have faced their struggles in the same sort of way as in a way, similar way to what Ron and Catherine have tonight. And we'll see the amazing recovery that Grant has made when doctors didn't even think he was going to live. So I'll put up a YouTube clip in a moment that you can watch just as a taster for that. So that's the next 2 weeks, well, that's the following 2 weeks. That's the 13th of July and the 20th of July. And on the 27th of July, we'll take another break and then we'll be back again the week after that. I'm going to leave the questionnaire up for a little bit more. So if you haven't done that, please go to the questionnaire and fill that in about what you like and what you don't like or suggestions. And there's a whole lot of people on tonight, I noticed, who aren't getting the Family Matters emails. If you want to be kept up to date, especially when it's not on every week, if you want to be kept up to date on what is happening what week, send me an email, robert@thinkythings.com, and I'll put that link up again as well. And I'll send you reminders. So yeah, and you can also find past recordings on our Ecclesial website. So thank you again, Ron and Catherine. And Ron, we're just wondering, would you mind closing with a prayer?
Sure.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for your involvement in our life. We know that it is not within man to direct his steps, and we commit our lives into your care. We ask that you will help to direct our steps and that you will help us to see the path in which you will direct our steps, so that we might be able to understand what your purpose is in our lives. We thank you for the trials that we go through, for the difficulties that we go through, because we know that in all of these difficulties, it actually shows your love and your care. And it gives us the ability to see things from your perspective. And in doing so, we're able to share with other people. We thank you for your ecclesia, for the bonds of fellowship and love that strengthen each other. And we commit our lives into your care through the one whom you sent to declare your character and your name, Jesus Christ, our King, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.